Welcome back. So, another celebrity has written a poetry collection. It's the new signature perfume, you know? You just have to do it. This time it's Halsey with her collection, I Would Leave Me If I Could. I don't know anything about Halsey. I think I know one of her songs. She could pass me on the street, I wouldn't know who she was. So this is completely unbiased, not a fan, don't hate her, literally don't know anything about her at all except that she is a singer. And that's it. Before I get into it, I just want to say very briefly that I do have a Patreon in the description, and also I offer manuscript consulting for poetry. Some people have reached out to me in response to my poetry ranting and asked me to read their poetry collections and offer edits and suggestions and things like that. And so that's a thing that I do if you're interested. I love doing it. It's been super fun. Thank you to the people who reached out to me. They have all been very happy, and I will say, you have to talk to me directly about this, but I charge less than almost anybody else, so consider it if you're a poet. Now anyways, let's get into it. First impressions. This is a beautiful hardcover book. It is dedicated to two people, one of whom is a former writing professor of Halsey's. For Professor Bradford, I loved writing in your class so much that I dropped out to go love it intensely. I'm a little confused. I mean, nothing against dropping out of school, especially if you, I don't know the trajectory. I don't know if she dropped out in the middle of becoming famous. Good move. Why go further into debt when you're already doing great? But you dropped out of a writing class to go write? Not a very good idea. And I also want to say very, very clearly, I am not an elitist. College is too expensive in the United States. You don't have to go to college to write and be a good writer, but you do need feedback from other people. And if you have an opportunity to get feedback from other people, take it. So yeah, just first impressions. She's been in a writing class. Interesting. She dropped out of the writing class. Also interesting. That's all I'm going to say about that. Also, this book is over 130 pages long, so in the inevitable act of comparing to other celebrity poetry collections, this is at least a poetry collection, which is more than I can say for Lana Del Rey's chapbook amount of poems combined with mediocre photography and other people's paintings. So Halsey actually wrote a book of poetry, a full-length, complete book of poetry. So, also along those lines of the inevitable comparisons I can't help doing, I'm sorry, Halsey, but this is decidedly a celebrity poetry collection. What does that mean? It means it was published because she's famous. How does it compare to other books that were published because of the fame of the author? Well, I've read Gabby Hanna's Adultolescence, and I've read Lana Del Rey's Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass, and I would say this is somewhere in between those two. I think Lana Del Rey's is my favorite, ooh, that's generous, of these that I have read. Even though I think it was kind of lazy and incomplete, I still think aesthetically it was more enjoyable than this, but this was more enjoyable and way closer to actual, impressive poetry techniques and things like that than Gabby Hanna. So just putting it in the sphere of these kinds of collections that I read for some reason. It's smack in the middle, basically. And we can play a quick game that I like to call Celebrity Poetry Bingo. Where does Halsey check off the sort of expected boxes? Well, she's got a lot of cliche similes and metaphors and things like that. There's at least one poem that seems like it's complaining about people thinking that she's rich. And there's a couple of poems that talk a lot about being a writer, being a poet, wanting to be a writer. Yeah, that's the way you do it. You write about it. You don't just do it, you write about it. That's how you do it if you're a celebrity. So now I want to talk about line breaks, okay? Because in amateur and celebrity poetry collections, the thing that I see most often, the thing that I think is the biggest problem, is that they have no clue where to break a line. And I'm sorry if this is elementary for some of you, but I feel like I need to explain at least a little bit, right? in poetry, you have sentences, just like in prose. I'm not going to define what a sentence is. You probably know that. But unlike in prose, you can either end the line with a full sentence, or you can take that sentence and break it up into 2 or more lines, which is called enjambment. It's very important to decide where to break your lines. You could even argue that this is kind of the most important distinction between poetry and prose. Of course, there are prose poems, so not in every case is a poem utilizing line breaks. But hey, when you think of poetry, what is the thing that distinguishes it from prose? It's shaped differently, and those are called lines. And it just seems like no thought went into where to break the lines in this collection. And so I just wanted to talk about this a little bit in depth, because I think most poets can spend hours, days, weeks thinking about how to break their lines, and it's like no one has ever said to any of these people that that should be like a thought process. So in preparation for this video, I read a blog article called Dear Bad Writers, Read This Poetic Line Break Guide, which was a blog post, and it definitely had some opinion in it, but I think it was a pretty good introductory guide. And in that, the writer of that blog post argued that you shouldn't end a line on an article, a conjunction, or a preposition, and she did suggest possibly ending on nouns, especially really interesting nouns. I would add that verbs are perfectly good, parts of speech to end a line on. And she also argued that another component can be rhythm, right? Breaking the line sort of rhythmically so that it sounds good and so that it's sort of even with the other lines. If you're a modern poet, you're probably writing a lot of free verse. This is probably not, there's no sonnets in here or whatever, but you can still, when in doubt, just break the lines sort of evenly. And she doesn't do that. It's really interesting. This is like the most egregious thing to me in celebrity poetry collections, like I said, is that there are just these arbitrary, super, super short lines next to super, super long lines, or just arbitrarily one-word lines, and it just is not good. So let me read some poems and try to explain why I think this technique really isn't working. Now, okay, I'm going to read some sections of two poems to demonstrate what I mean. I have even more disclaimer. I'm sorry, I haven't gotten into any of the actual meat of the book yet. But I have to say that when reading poetry aloud, I have been taught that you don't actually pause at the end of a line break. You just keep going. But I'm going to pause. I'm going to have exaggerated pauses at the end of line breaks so that you can visualize what the line breaks are, where the lines are broken. So this is from a poem called Due Date. I was born 5 weeks early. I couldn't wait to join the rest of the world. And that is, exactly, the moment my enthusiasm ceased. Now see, I'm reading it badly because you wouldn't read it that way. But that's how it looks on the page. And that is exactly the moment. Why? Why are you doing this? Why not just have a full sentence or like 2 even rhythmic lines? Like, why? I just don't get why. I don't think that she's thinking about why. Okay, this is from a poem called Homemaker. Listen to that cool, cool water run. Listen to that cool water run. Listen to that cool, cool water run. It's just, why? Why these big pauses? I don't understand. And I want to talk about specifically when this is used at the end of a poem, which is done in the case of this poem called Homemaker. So the final lines read, again with my exaggerating pausing that you shouldn't actually do if you read poetry aloud. His and her sinks, but just for you. So but, just, for, you are all separate words. Wow. To me, what this feels like, especially on the final lines of a poem, which is like so overutilized in a lot of poetry, it's like a mic drop to me. It's like, it reads like you think, because the effect of having a short line like this, having short lines like this, is that it draws attention to the words. It's like a big arrow. It's like, look at this. And to me, the impact of that, it reads like you think it's a really good line. It reads like a mic drop. And I don't know. I mean, first of all, if you have a really good line, like, be modest about it. Like, maybe be subtle. Just kind of sneak it in. We'll notice if you have a good line. You don't have to draw attention to it. And if the line isn't anything remarkable and you do this, like, yeah, it's like, that's how it reads to me. That's how it reads to me. It's just, like, a little cocky and weird. I mean, maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe that's just my subjective reading of it. But it's, like, I would argue that it draws attention. And you don't need to draw attention to... Like, if it is a good line, we'll notice. I promise. So finally, I'm just going to comb through this book and read sections I think are really good or really bad or notable in any way. Here we go. This is from a poem called Introduction, the first poem in the collection. These lines: the classical arpeggio climaxing into the blue balls of worship music. I just thought that was a kind of weird. I don't really know what you mean by that. Oh, and there's multiple stanzas about the muse putting her fingers up Halsey's nose, the speaker's nose. There's a lot of, like, kind of gross imagery in this collection, which is not something you can't do. It's just a little jarring. Here are some stanzas. A beautiful woman is a car crash. Shiny asphalt and smoking rubber, melted plastic and metal edges, glimmering glass, shrapnel iridescence scattered across the road, haphazard beauty, dignified and slightly terrifying. That's kind of nice. I see some real, like, potential in that. Not to sound... I don't know. She understands how to use sounds together, right? So that they sound nice, repeated sounds. I want to walk away from my bones and set them down on a counter like my keys after work. That's kind of cool. That's original. I get what you're saying, and it sounds interesting. I like that. See, I'm not just being mean. She's got some good stuff in here. What else? This is from a poem called I Am Angry Because of My Father. I can hold a grudge like it's a hand. Okay. I'm sorry. It's just like you're sitting there and you're like, I can hold a grudge like, okay, simile time. What can you hold? And then you come up with, like, one of the very first things. This isn't Family Feud. You're not supposed to come up with the thing that everyone else would think. You're supposed to do, like, and you're not really supposed to do the opposite of that either. It's like there's a balance, and this is what I think Halsey really needs to work on, is, like, finding that middle ground between completely obvious and just insane. And I'll go on to explain. Okay, I'm going to read two poems back to back because they're very short, and they're in different parts of the collection, but I think I have, like, the same thing to say about both of them. This one's called Battles. Been biting my tongue till it bleeds, cry over things I don't need. I think I should be crying. Been biting, cry. Anyway. Been biting my tongue till it bleeds, cry over things I don't need. My mother told me pick your battles wisely, but you made me angry at the world, so I chose them all. Okay. You know what it reminds me of? Been biting my tongue till it bleeds. I've got blood in my mouth because I've been biting my tongue all week. I think Jenny Lewis wrote it better. I don't even know if Halsey knows that song, but she is a musician, so maybe she does. And then there's this short poem called 16 Missed Calls. It's another Monday morning and you still haven't slept in your bed. It's only been 3 days, but I'm told that Jesus did a lot over the weekend when we thought he was dead. You know what that reminds me of? Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm alone again. So what did you do those 3 days you were dead? 'Cause this problem's gonna last more than the weekend. Brand new. Wrote it better. I'm not accusing her of plagiarism. I'm accusing her of a lack of originality, because whenever there's a moment where I'm like, that's kind of clever, but wait, I usually think, like, but wait a minute, I've heard it before. Like, that was just what I thought when I read those lines. I will also say, see, I think the problem with these collections is, again, that they get published because you're famous, and so you don't even get a chance to really improve or be told, like, you're not ready. And a lot of these poems, like, really remind me of the kind of stuff I wrote when I, like, first started writing poetry in a more serious way in college and stuff. So that's just an observation. These are lines from a poem called Wish You the Best. I hope your team loses the finals. I mean, they already lost the finals, but the next one. And I hope you scratch up all of your vinyls. Hope you drive 80 miles in your expensive car and run out of gas in the wild. I just wrote janky rhymes. I don't know how else to say it. Maybe it's just me. Very janky, very all over the place. I don't know. You can have rhymes that are in a surprising place, but I just don't think that was a very good example of how to do that. Here's a poem called I Met a Mind Reader. This is some lines from that. She's describing darkness. Not the romantic kind that fills the gaps in between city lights and candlelit dinners and moonlight bouncing off of crystal glasses filled with champagne, lipstick stained. That's kind of nice. I feel like, and there's another line. I sat out on an old bus packed in like crowded teeth in a young mouth. That's kind of nice. I feel like I would be interested to see Halsey write some prose. Because, like I said, I don't think she hits quite the right balance between, like poetry. Your similes and metaphors and descriptions, they have to be, like, excellent because there's just not that many words. And obviously people try to write really good similes and metaphors and descriptions in prose, too. But sometimes I feel like you can fall back on, like, a less exciting one. And I just would be interested to see what she did with prose. Because some of this stuff is like good enough. I don't want to say good enough for prose. I just would be interested to see her sort of tackle another genre. I feel like poetry is just what these celebrities just go for, or memoir. Those are the genres that celebrities write in, and I don't know. I would be interested to see her try some prose. Oh, she has a poem about masturbation, and I just wanted to say that's good. I like it. I'm not going to read it aloud. You have to buy the book if you want to read Halsey's masturbation poem. That's good advertisement. See, I'm not a complete jerk. I'm getting people to buy the book. You can buy the book. It's not terrible. Here's another one of those moments where I'm like, this is good, but not great. It's the feeling in my stomach like the moment you drop a scoop of ice cream into a root beer float and the entire thing threatens to bubble over, carbonated and chaotic in my chest. That's pretty good. That's kind of good. I like it. I think it would be good in I'd like to see her write a short story or something. Lullaby. Here's some lines from that. You hang like a chain around my neck. Again. It's just, it's not Family Feud. Don't go with the first thing you think of. You hang like a chain around my neck, like a bee sting in August. This is a thing she does a couple times where she starts on one simile and then she quickly moves to a completely different one, which kind of like mixing metaphors. You should probably see your original simile through to the end and not just like immediately. It's very jarring to do that, and she does it sort of a lot. Let's see, what else? Another one. Ooh, this poem's about a body part, and I'm not going to tell you which one. You have to buy the book to find out. See? Advertising. More. You should sponsor me, Halsey. Again, I can't say the title aloud. But there's a line in it that says, I follow like a moth to the bulb to fry. Again, like a moth to a flame, like a moth to a light. It's cliche. It's a cliche. Someone needs to talk to her about what a cliche is and why not to use them. Here's some lines from a poem called Hereditary. I'm impatient and passive-aggressive, compulsive, obsessive, but mostly poetic. It's really good to remind people that you're poetic in your poetry collection. Otherwise, how would they possibly know that? Here's some lines from a poem called Drama Queen. Can you feel the fabric of being alone? The rush against your skin that vibrates all along your bones. Pause like a broken zipper, a sterling silver whisper, and you shake and shiver from a velvet shimmer. Will you pull it down just a sliver? Okay, here's another moment where I'm like, I see potential, but I do not see potential realized. Okay. Can you feel the fabric of being alone? The rush against your skin that vibrates all along your bones. I feel like that's really nice. I like it. For once, she's actually like breaking her lines in a sensible way, mostly influenced by the rhythm of the lines. Great. Then she moves on. Pause like a broken zipper. Sure, that's cool. That's not the first thing I think of when I think of pause, but it's also like sensible. A sterling silver whisper. Now we're like somewhere out. You're losing me. I don't know where we are. I don't know what's going on. And then the last few lines just kind of like rely entirely on the S sounds and the I sounds, and which is good to do, but you can't rely on that so heavily that I feel like that's the only reason you're choosing those words. It has to be like sound and meaning, right? You can't just do just sound, and personally I just don't really know like what is going on. I guess a person is whispering, but there's just too many different similes in a short space. I feel like individual ones are good, and she just needs to like pick one, be a little bit more simple with it, see it through to the end. Here's some lines I like. Chartreuse like an aging bruise, he speaks soft words but still abuse. That's kind of nice. I don't know. I like the chartreuse bruise rhyme. Chartreuse is the color of a bruise. It's not just chosen because it sounds cool. It's also makes logical sense. Ooh, this is a lot like the section that I read just like 2 poems ago. My fingers graze your arm, and I can feel little electric volts wrapping up and around my wrists like a spiral staircase, like a static handcuff, holding my hand hostage to your skin. Again, like it starts off good. I like it. My fingers graze your arm, and I can feel little electric volts wrapping up and around my wrists like a spiral staircase. Cool. Like a static handcuff. Where? What? Pick one. You don't need to do 2 similes every time you do a simile, Halsey. You can just pick one. More stuff that I like. I love the sun for shining on your skin. I love the wind for blowing through your hair. I love the coffee for staining your teeth and warming your palms in the morning. It's kind of simple, but I think it has like a quiet elegance to it. I like those lines. I think they sound honest, which is something I value in poetry. She has this long poem called The Painter that I thought was really good, pretty good anyway. I don't know, good. One of the better poems in the collection, I think, in my opinion. Uses a lot of concrete sensory details. I would have been interested to see if she wrote, like, what this would read like if she wrote it as flash fiction instead. Not saying it isn't working as a poem. I just kind of am like not convinced of her knowledge of poetic techniques specifically, but I do think that Halsey is a pretty good writer. Or could be, potentially. Okay, so there are 2 poems that I want to talk about, little sections of 2 poems right in a row that I want to discuss. The first one's called The Baker, and she's describing a slice of cake and says, I winced as the pieces crumbled like a landslide. I feel like, again, it's not the first thing that would come to mind when you think of crumbling, but it's like it might be on the scoreboard. I really like this Family Feud comparison. I feel like it's working well for what I'm trying to say in terms of this balance. And then in the next poem, she writes this. This is called Ordinary Boys. There are ordinary boys, and then there are boys who stick an arm down your throat and grasp your heart, digging through your entrails while your teeth rub against the socket of their elbow. Whoa. I mean, I guess I like that better than cake crumbling like a landslide. But again, I think there's like a middle ground between mundane, kind of expected, and just like completely bizarre. That's just me though. There's this poem called A Story Like Mine that's like specifically references Me Too and is obviously about that movement and about her own experiences. And I think that's a great thing to write a poem about. I don't think it's as powerful as she probably wants it to be. In my opinion, it's kind of like, it's almost like sing-songy with the rhymes and stuff, and I actually don't think the tone really matches the message, and to a point where it was like kind of jarring and weird to read. But I appreciate the attempt, bringing attention to an important movement, being on the right side. Good job, Halsey. Didn't actually think that was a very good poem. Here's a line from another poem. His smile shines like sun on fresh snow. I just think you could try a little harder. It's kind of nice. At least it's not just shining like sun. It's shining like sun on fresh snow. I can picture that. It's kind of nice. Am I being too mean? Am I being too mean? I don't know. She's very famous. She's doing great. Okay, here's a few lines from a poem called Forever Cursed in Love Are the Observant. I like the title. Interesting. My mouth tastes like cinnamon whiskey and menthol cigarettes. Cabernet Sauvignon, spearmint gum, and your hot, heavy breath. Okay, Halsey. Do you have some sort of rare medical condition? Your mouth tastes like cinnamon whiskey, menthol cigarettes, cab sav, spearmint gum, and somebody's breath all at the same time. That is too many things. And, like, this is my issue. And I am working on this. I think this is a tough thing. You have to realize as a poet and as a writer, like, it's all about reading from someone else's perspective, which is impossible. It's very hard to get out of your own perspective, but you have to try and have to realize that people are going to read your poetry at face value. They're going to believe the words that you're saying in a literal way, even though you're working in a genre that uses a lot of similes and metaphors. People are still, like, there needs to be an engagement with logic. And you can engage with logic in a way that you are breaking logic and doing interesting things with it, but you can't just throw it out the window and act like it doesn't matter. Like, and again, this is something I need to work on. It's like you have all these associations in your head. You have your whole life and the things that you're writing from, and maybe to her, she's like, yeah, the reader's gonna understand that I'm just kind of trying to set the scene with whiskey and cigarettes and wine and gum and kissing. Like, this is just like a party atmosphere or whatever. But I'm just reading the literal words that you wrote, and I expect them I expect you to mean what you say. And you're sort of breaking, like, the contract with the reader here, where I'm like, I don't believe that you have 5 different tastes in your mouth at once, because I don't think that that's possible. If you drink whiskey and you move on to wine, then you're gonna taste wine. And then when you chew the gum, maybe it'll be mixed with the wine. I don't know, maybe she should just brush her teeth or something. Because that's too many tastes. Anyways, again, you might think I'm being too literal, but I don't think that poetry is, like, by definition not literal. Like, they're words and people read them and expect them to mean. And anyway, so that was I Would Leave Me If I Could. For overall thoughts, I thought it was okay. I think she's got this is what I said about Lana Del Rey. I mean, these are songwriters. They're not, like, unartistic people. I mean, I don't think anyone's really unartistic. Everyone has creative potential, and I do think that Halsey is a decent writer, but I wish we could see what she would write if an editor had if editors and publishers were not businesses that had to just make money, if they could approach her like any other person. And it does make me sad. This is the conclusion of all of these types of videos, and maybe I harp on this too much, maybe I care too much about this, but I just know a lot of writers, and I know there's just, like, thousands and thousands of beautiful poetry collections that will never get published, and it's just a very competitive world out there, and she gets to have, like, a beautiful hardcover book. Like, poetry isn't even usually in hardcover. Like, it just makes me kind of sad, and it's fine, it's harmless. Like I've said before, who's this doing harm to? Nobody. Halsey's fans get a collection of poetry. If you're famous for doing one thing super well, I guess you should get to go do something in an average to slightly above average-ish way and get to do it, because you've kind of earned your spot, I suppose. She's not the best, but she's not the worst, okay? Gabby Hanna's a lot worse. I think it was maybe unfair to say Lana Del Rey's writing was better. I mean, I feel like they're basically tied, and I do feel like Halsey was actually trying more. She wrote a lot more words and things like that, but, you know, and nobody can bump James Franco out of his place as being, like, the absolute worst celebrity writer ever. I haven't read his poetry on here. That would be fun if you're interested. I have a complicated relationship with making these videos because it feels like an ethical gray area to be this harsh about anybody's work. but I do feel a lot better. I would not do this to like a self-published poet who is like an unknown entity. That would feel really cruel. But like, I'm a YouTube channel with less than 1,000 subscribers, and Halsey is a person who goes by a single name. Like, there's a power dynamic here that I feel like makes this okay. So that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching a very long video. Let me know if you would like me to go through the horrible task of reading any of your suggestions. You know, I can read other celebrity collections. I did this one on request, so the requests work. Thank you for watching. Bye.